Welcome to Venture Unscripted, a podcast where we talk with founders and entrepreneurs about their journey from 0 to 1. Welcome to Venture Unscripted today. I've got with me Matt Gira, and so he oversees all of Yale's venture programming. So I'm really excited to talk to you today about all sorts of different things, Matt. So welcome.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah. So why don't we just tell the audience a little bit about yourself and what you're up to and kind of where you were and where you're going in your career.
Yeah, so I am currently the director of student programming at the Tsai Center for Innovative Thinking at Yale, which is essentially the student innovation and entrepreneurship center at Yale. And so I oversee the student mentored programs there. But it's been a little bit of a roller coaster to get here. So I started at Hope College, the school that's about 30 minutes west of here, and in entrepreneurship, which is it's not a school known for entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
And it was doing different, did like these Bluetooth, mason jar speakers and all these different things on Etsy, and that's where I kind of got my start. And then the bigger startup that actually kind of became something, but then didn't, was called Fathom. We made underwater drones. So we started that my junior year at Hope. We went through Techstars. We did a huge Kickstarter campaign. We pitched in front of Damon John. Just like a really wild story and all of that. So did all of that for about 4 or 5 years. We shut it down about 4 years ago, which feels kind of crazy to say. And when we shut it down, I had like a year of just like figuring things out. But when the pandemic hit, I was like, all right, I want to get out of Michigan. Thankfully, I had actually, when I was at Hope and doing Fathom, I interned at Yale for a little bit, for about a summer, to learn what they were doing, because West Michigan didn't have those resources just yet. And so, pandemic hit, got out of Michigan, went back to my parents' house without any real plan, and then opened up over there, and that was it.
Awesome. I want to know a little bit about the mason jars. Tell me about this mason. Is it speakers you create out of mason jars?
Yeah, so I made all the rookie mistakes, like trying to drill glass with just a regular drill bit, which is like not...
Seems not very good.
Yeah, it's not smart.
It shatters, I would assume.
Shatters a lot, really dangerous, not a great idea. But yeah, it was these speakers that the whole premise was that tech looked too much like tech. If you weren't going to put that in your home, you wanted to be more design oriented. That was the whole concept around that. Okay. So these painted mason jar speakers that looked pretty, but also had the tech side of it.
Yes.
That was the whole thing.
Did it work? I mean, would you say that was a success, or would you say?
I think it was a success and a learning opportunity.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you did the product actually work, and you tried selling it then?
Yeah. I think I sold about 30, 40.
Oh, nice. That's good.
So which is solid. Half of it was people I knew, but it still was a start. I learned so much through that. Just marketing is harder than I ever thought it was.
Yeah.
And just product development and scaling up is a really big pain in the butt.
Yes.
And it's because you can't scale building, drilling a hole in mason jars. No. It just doesn't work.
Yes. So. Nice. And did you think in that startup, did you think if you build it, they will come? Is that what you thought?
A little bit. I think also I was naive at certain, it was oh, this marketing technique's it. I didn't experiment. It was just this is it.
This is the one, this is the path.
Yeah. It was too bullish, too many assumptions I didn't ever test.
Yeah. Well, and so then after that, tell me a little bit about, I want to know the story about Fathom drones, because that sounds really fascinating. Tell me about that.
Yeah, so I was living with a few guys. So I was building the mason jar speakers, so I was doing chemistry research at Hope for a little while.
Okay.
And 3 other guys I was living with were doing research in engineering and different aspects. And so I was in the entrepreneurship program though at night. It was essentially how, thankfully Hope and my professors and things were super flexible. That's one of the things I loved about Hope. But they really supported that. So at night I'd be in the engineering lab, drilling holes in mason jars and do all these things. So did all of that, but then living with these guys, they were like, hey, we have all these ideas. So it ended up by the end of the summer, every night I'd come home at 10 o'clock, start making dinner, and here comes Danny with I have this idea. And so there's all these different ideas and a bajillion of them. And then about 2 weeks after summer ended, we were both all at home before the semester started. And Danny's like, hey, what about underwater drones? I was like, that has to exist. Because this is when aerial drones started really taking off.
Yeah.
It was 2015, 2015-ish, where DJI was just becoming a thing, just this massive organization. So I was like, that has to exist because drones are everywhere right now. Right. And there was 2 companies. And I was like, that's super fascinating. And they're all very research heavy. And I was like, all right, let's check this out. So we did. They started engineering, and I was like, all right, let's figure out. Let's just get this to a pitch competition, and like we did that. So student pitch competitions are everywhere. They still are to this day. They're a huge resource. So we went down to Accelerate Michigan, which I don't think exists anymore, but that was in Detroit, and we had like this really raggedy 3D printed like prototype that had zero functionality, just like a dummy model. We had like a pitch deck that was like really brutal, but like it got the point across, and we got to the final round somehow. And like people were like, "Whoa, like you were amazing!" And everything. We got like so much good feedback off of that event. We didn't win anything,
Yeah.
but just like the feedback and like, hey, like you should actually pursue this. Like that was like a validation moment for us.
Yeah.
So that was like the big push, and then I think the bigger push though was like me getting accepted into I got the Yale opportunity in that summer, and then at the same time we got accepted to a program that was called Emerge Accelerate, which is like a more like they called it an accelerator, it was more like a pre-accelerator program, I think. It was like a summer, they gave you a 20 grand check. It was meant for non-college kids, but here we were as college kids with a 20 grand check. So that was like a new curve. So, but I think like those two things together, like we were able to kind of put together the knowledge base to like, all right, like let's see what we can do with this afterwards.
Nice. Okay, so you in that pitch competition, how much effort did you put so that you had a prototype, but it's mostly for show, right?
Yeah, it didn't function at all.
It didn't function at all.
No.
So at what point did you went and pitched it, you got some good validation and feedback. Then after that, were you like, this is a good idea, we should double down on it? Is that how it kind of
I
went?
think we thought it was like just a good idea in general, but I think like that was like, oh, we're not crazy moment.
Yes.
Which right, and you can always feel so crazy as a founder, like are we actually building the right thing? Yeah, are we crazy? And maybe it was like too much validation for us because we're like, we're gonna do this.
Yes.
So we did that, and then we had a lot of good conversations with people, and like some of our conversations were like naive. Like we were like going to people like, we want 100 grand check, and we're like, they're not gonna write that, guys. So like there's like so much like the first time founder like
Yes.
college student like moments. Like we had all of those. Like pick a moment, like pick a typical stereotype, like what you think of college founders. Like we probably hit it at some point. We just didn't know.
Yes.
So yeah.
So did you, after that moment, like, when was the moment that because I think you started digging into manufacturing and
Yep.
like you actually created working prototypes, is that right? And like, how did that journey like progress after that?
Yeah. So we ended up doing, so we had this really, also the thing, we were like, we're going to build this really novel concept for an underwater drone. It's going to be like this brand new thing where it's going to be like jet propulsion and like all these different things. We're like, that's what we're going to do. So the summer of 2015, that's what we did. We tried building that out. And essentially it was like this one, like you can think of it as like a pipe, an exhaust pipe that went through the whole thing. And like the thought was like that would push it through. Well, we built one model of that, and we put it, first is like we put it in a pool, and all it did is corkscrew left. Like that's all it did.
Hey, it moved.
Yeah, but like the tubing like even like broke down like
Oh,
every minute. And it'd be like an $800 part too that
Yes.
like we
Oof.
like just broke down in like one try.
Yes.
So that was fun. But then one of the crazier parts though is like we put it in a fish tank, and just like had it like move water. It was basically if you put like just like a standard motor in a bucket of water and just like moved water around in a plastic housing, like that's all it was. But like we're like, hey, we're doing prototyping, like we're doing all these different things, and like BBC and Discovery News end up picking this up. It's like, look at this new underwater drone company, and like we barely had a landing page. So we had to go we got like 800 emails overnight, which was just like for us, it was like, what is this? So that's kind of how we like, oh yeah, we have validation now with these emails, and
Right.
like things are picking up, and look, we were on BBC as college kids.
Right. And then where did the Kickstarter, because you did a Kickstarter, right? Where did that all come in?
Yeah. So we got to that summer, and then we ended up like that jet propulsion like novel concept is not going to work.
Yes.
But thankfully, right, we have a team of engineers, and they're like, let's redesign this in a different way, and like it's more traditional.
Yes.
So they did that, and with like these removable propellers and things like that. And we won another pitch competition here in Grand Rapids called 5x5 Night, which still exists. And we did that. That was a big moment for us. And then we went through like senior year, and we're like, you know what, like let's see what we can do in the summer, because like we're just about to graduate, and like what do we have to lose? Like we have like, yes, we have job offers, but those job offers we can get even after like the summer. So we all like work part-time jobs, like pay the bills, and we're like, we're gonna do it like end of August, like give us as much time as we can to do a huge Kickstarter campaign. We have the emails, we have the prototypes now. We feel like we can manufacture this thing. Let's do it. So we ended up building all this hype. We did a big launch party at the Grand Rapids Public Museum because we were working with them at the time a little bit on stuff. And yeah, the Kickstarter like did about 200, like just under 200K in about essentially 6 days.
That's great.
So it was a really just like fast paced, like crazy moment for us.
Yeah.
Like I even like then that whole week, like I went to the gas station to get a drink and like came back and there was like 20 grand like up like just in like 30 minutes.
Oh my gosh.
Because Kickstarter themselves like pushed it out. So there's just like a lot of crazy stories with all that too.
Oh, nice. So then you got all this cash.
Yep.
What happened after that?
Yeah, so we did that, and then I think about a month in, it was like, oh boy, like this is going to be a huge learning curve, and we got some other issues too. So we learned that manufacturing was going to be like we had a partner that we walked into with Kickstarter, but then about like a few months in, we kind of figured out that wasn't the right partner, and we had to spend a lot of money to do that with. So it was like, what do we do from here?
Yeah.
Because like obviously we have to deliver like something, and like we haven't fundraised yet, really.
Yes.
So like this is all the cash we have, and like also like we're trying to like pay the bills as well. So it was like, what do we do? So there's a couple different like things that end up like we were trying to feel like, do we sell this thing? Somehow sell this thing? I don't even know what we have. And then we were like, let's try to fundraise. So we are on the fundraising tour as well. But we are a VC's nightmare. We are a B2C company building hardware with no recurring revenue. So we were just like, it was like a nightmare to pitch. And like looking back, I'm like, what were we trying to pitch there?
Yes.
Which totally makes sense why we got all these no's. But we got through this whole thing, and I'm doing like podcast interviews, trying to like build hype for like investors and things like that. And one of our Danny Ellis, who's now he's the current co-founder and CEO at SkySpecs, another aerial drone company. We had a couple conversations with him, but he's like, Matt, you should like apply to Techstars Detroit. Like, Techstars Mobility, it's like you are mobility, like you fit this. I'm like, are we really? So he's like, you should just go for it. And I was like, all right. So we ended up applying for it. I didn't feel like we were going to get in because I was like, no investor's really taking a bite at the apple for us, all these different things. And then within a few months, like we got Techstars and we got in, and that was like it gave us the check size, it gave us the programming side. They kind of filled in the gaps for us from a knowledge base standpoint too, because I really didn't realize I didn't know how to fundraise. There's actually a process to this, rather than just like having random meetings and whatnot. So that was a big moment too. Just like we got a check, which then allowed us to deliver, and then we were able to find a manufacturing partner that allowed us to like really support us too. And essentially, they invested essentially because they were building off of like, hey, we're going to build this out over a loan and things like that. And so they were super supportive and like really grateful for what they did too.
Nice.
Yeah.
So you got into Techstars. How long was Techstars, that process?
So that program itself was a 3-month program, but to get in was probably like a 3 to 6 month process.
So it was a little while. Yeah,
It took
a while.
Yeah.
And then when you went through it, you got to the point where you found a manufacturer.
Yep.
And then you start manufacturing the drones?
Yeah, but it even took time. Like it wasn't until like 6 months after we got through Techstars that like, we started seeing like, hey, like we're going down. The manufacturing plant was down in Ohio. So we ended up working with them. We were going down there quite a few times, and working through like supply chain, which was like a whole different animal.
Totally different animal.
And at the time, like if it was like last year or so, like I don't even know if we would have like that would have been crazy. I mean, even finding screws is like a big deal.
Yes.
So we learned all of those hiccups, but yeah, that took it like it was 6 months after Techstars, I think, if I remember right. And then about 6 months, it took 6 to 8 months, I think, just to even see the first units like not built by us.
Wow.
So. And
what was the initial after you got some units plugged out? What happened?
Yeah, then we were in like tech, is this like software ready? Is the firmware ready? Like all these different aspects. And then also like we need to build a marketing engine because like we just like the way I thought about it still to this day is like we built a rocket ship for Kickstarter, but we didn't think about what was afterwards. So we didn't continue the marketing. And we kept just getting all these emails, and at the time we didn't realize how those emails kept coming in. And really it's because of all the press we got Detroit Free Press and BBC and all these different things, like our domain ranking was super high.
Yes.
And so if you search underwater drones, like we were the top hit.
Yes.
For a really long time. And that drove emails by itself.
Yes.
But we were being the naive first-time founders, like didn't realize that and didn't build off that. So as new competitors were coming in, like we're dropping down the rankings because they actually know what they're doing.
Right.
So they ended up doing that, and then all of a sudden, like our emails are going to zero, and like we really have no marketing like funnel or anything like that, but we're still trying to build product. So that was like but we didn't really realize we needed to be continuing to doing that, or we didn't prioritize it.
Sure.
And I think if we would have done it better, I think we would have built content, done these things at a different level, to continue that engine.
Yes.
So that way we can continue, even if we weren't selling at the moment, doing pre-sales, like we could then still, hopefully deliver, or start like, hey, we're back open. Like we just shipped, and like we have this full marketing piece, but we started marketing like right when manufacturing started. So it's like a little too little, too late.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what was the moment so how many did you end up manufacturing though?
It was about 500 to 600 of them.
500 to 600.
Yep.
Did you end up selling a portion of them or all of them, hopefully?
So all of them were the pre-orders. So like there was,
okay.
it was like, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And then what was the moment that, you had said you did marketing too late, that you were like, oh my gosh, we're in trouble?
So we got to November, I forget the exact, 2019. And like we had investors at the time. We had raised it with a few angels and Techstars, obviously. And I always did a monthly update with them and keep them in the loop. And essentially by November update it was either October or November. I was like, hey, like we're running out of cash. Like we're gonna fundraise. We're gonna try, but like revenue's a big deal. If we can't do revenue during the holiday season, like what's the point? So our whole thing was like, let's just dump all the money we have and resources into this like Christmas season, because if we are as good as if we think we're going to be successful, like we have to nail the next 2 months.
Yeah.
And so we did. Like investors were like, let's do it. And so we did that, and we did okay. It wasn't like super like let's like be thrilled about what just happened like sales wise for that season.
Yeah.
But it wasn't like, oh, like I feel bad about this. It was like a nice neutral.
Yes.
But then like December 26th happened, which is the biggest return date of the year, and like almost every single unit was coming back for different reasons.
Oh man.
So it was more of like product isn't ready. Our team's feeling
no.
burnt out because we've been on this 4-year like haul.
Yes.
Of the roller coaster, and this like money's out. So it was like everything you can imagine from like a startup going wrong, like it kind of came to a point together.
Yes.
So we got to like December, and we're like, all right, this is it.
This is it. Yeah. And where are all those drones now? Are they in your basement?
I have 2 of them.
Okay.
But they're just duds. They're paperweights.
Yes.
So
Do they still work? I mean, any
I
of them?
think so.
Okay.
Because the one, like battery safety is a big deal. We learned that the hard way. And then the like software isn't. We haven't supported it.
Yeah. Okay. And what are there any stories in there because of good takeaways that as people are hearing you talk about this?
Yeah.
If you could rewind time?
Yeah.
Like what are some things you would have changed that's like, hey, we did this, but I would have done it this way?
I think our marketing engine could have been way better and cooler.
Yeah.
We had these cool like these drones that can create good content if we did it right.
Yes.
Now, like if we're in Lake Michigan, probably not, because that's just like a green blob. But like if maybe we get out of Michigan for a little while and like just record content for 3 months, down in the Keys or wherever that might look like. I think that we would have had this huge content. We can be more of like that vlog style. We could have built that up because there's such a huge audience there that we would fit right into. So I think that would have been a good option for us. But I think in general, just like a content engine that actually we knew what was happening. Like we understood our funnel for the first time. We didn't understand that.
Yeah.
And then 2, like not trying to do this super high tech product out of the gate as like a first time founder.
Yes.
Like we tried even doing like a rental model where like we could rent it at hotels, and like that way we can get a recurring revenue model. But by the time we tried doing that, like it was like, again, we're getting too late for this. And all that jazz. But so I think we could have figured out the business model too, but I think the big thing was like not like we try to get too complicated too fast.
Yeah. And do you feel like people that are creating physical products, I feel like there's a little bit of a different journey of how do you, when you're talking about lean startup tactics, how do you do that? Do you feel like you guys did that okay, pretty well, not so great? How would that have changed like in that process?
So we were, kind of like we would try the lean startup products, like get emails, but like it's literally all we could do and try to do pre-orders. So that was the 2 big things we could do.
Yes.
But at the same time, it's like hardware is a really expensive thing.
Yes.
And we went through we met a lot of good mentors and advisors through Techstars, and they're like, Matt, like you need to raise $2.5 million minimum.
Yeah.
Like that's the minimum. And I was like, I can't even imagine us raising $1 million.
Yes.
Because like if you look at all the market segments, like they don't add up to something that's like gets VCs all excited. And like just like also we're hardware, there's no recurring revenue yet.
Yes.
Like there's nothing here that gets people like super excited. We're also just like a bunch of first time founders who just came out of college.
Yes.
That was the part that I think investors were like, there's nothing here I'm excited about.
Yes.
So like from a lean startup standpoint, like I don't think that would have been the true lean startup method. Like I don't know if that would fit with what like to have a drone company. I don't think it made sense for our hardware necessarily. But if we took it more of like, hey, we're gonna build content, this whole content engine, and then do simpler products where it's like maybe it's like we're doing t-shirts and like even just starting with that kind of stuff and like building a brand off of that and then like building up as more complicated. That probably would have been the better method to go.
Yeah. Nice. So out of that entire experience, sounds like a lot of learnings, and sounds like a lot of fun.
Yeah.
But also there's highs and lows, I'm sure, in there too.
Yeah.
So cool. Now after that, after you kind of put a bow on it, how did that all end? And then you said you took a break, and that like, what does that transition look like from where you were to where you are?
Yeah. So the break was like a lot of things were happening. Like life really changed. Like just everything that like from the foundations like of what my life was like, it just like all like not disappeared, but like really broke down. Like personal stuff was changing, like work stuff was changing, like everything was on like in the flux, which is, I guess is expected for a mid 20-year-old like coming out of college.
Yeah.
But it was like going off of like you're like mourning this like fathom thing, which really wasn't like a mourning process. It was more like a stress relief. I think it was, which I didn't expect that. And so going through that, but also like to pay the bills, I was doing like grocery delivery through Ships. Like that's the way I paid the bills for a year and a half.
Yeah.
Which is okay, but also gave me a lot of time to like just put audiobooks in, like I'm delivering groceries and like learned a lot through that. Like there's a few books that like mentors and advisors were like, hey Matt, like this will be therapy for you. And I listened to those, like went through that, like Shoe Dog by Phil Knight. It was like one that was like, oh yeah, like, I can relate to this. So there was like so many different things that was really helpful to kind of just like process everything that was happening.
Yeah.
But also taking the time, okay, what's the next step? Like I knew I want to get back into startups. Like that was very evident to me.
Yeah.
I didn't want to leave this like startup world. I wanted to stay in it. What that looked like though could have been like a million different options. So I just kind of leaned into like, hey, I'm going to help build the Grand Rapids, West Michigan ecosystem a bit for the time being, and did events and did bi-weekly events and things like that, and tried this new membership model and whatnot. But at the end of the day, like pandemic hit, everything was kind of moving. I was like, it was just like a weird moment of like everything kind of like the seas parted.
Yeah.
And I was like, it's time to go.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Well, just before we move on to the next, like I want to hear about what you're doing now.
yeah.
But if there's a founder or entrepreneur listening of like went through a similar journey where like they put their heart and soul into something and it didn't work out.
Yeah.
What are some things you would recommend in that 1 year journey you had of like, hey, these things like really?
I think one is just like process it. Don't feel like you have to jump into it.
Yeah.
To the next thing, like, definitely like pay the bills and like get the foundations right again. That for me was like a learning curve too. Because like, what is a salary? Like, I don't even know what that was.
Right.
So that was a big moment. So I think just like getting the personal stuff right, and also like getting your like even personal relationships right, like focusing on those and just like, hey, I'm gonna lean into that for a little bit and just like decompress.
Yeah.
What I didn't realize, and now like as someone who's going through it like in different ways, is like just like burnout was really real. So like it's just like you're not as creative. Like you have to take breaks. Like taking 1 day a week off is huge. For Fathom, I wasn't doing that. So it was always just like go, go, go. So that's like, it's a lot of like, okay, what went wrong, dissecting, reflecting on that, but also just like, hey, I'm going to focus on other things so that my next thing can be even better.
Right. No, that's solid. Good advice. And during that year journey, you then moved on and somehow ended up at Yale.
Yeah.
So what is that somehow? Like, how did that actually
How did
transpire?
that happen? So essentially, right, so I like, the seas parted, I think it was like May of 2020.
Yeah.
I had just gotten a dog. Like it was like I thought things were really stable. They weren't. But yeah, I was like, I'm gonna leave. I'm gonna go back to my parents' house, which is like everyone's dream. So with no real plan, like moved back in, and then I was only there for a month, because the second I got back to my parents' place, like I think like within like 48 hours, there's this really cool opening called the Innovation Fellow at the Tsai Center for Innovative Thinking at Yale. Essentially, it was like, hey, we want you to like test new programs out and like be entrepreneurial minded, and just like build new stuff that like students would like just enjoy and also just like learn from. So I applied to it. I like reached out to my mentor over there, who I was like, "Do you think I'm a fit? Like, you write a recommendation?" He's like, "Yeah, put me down. Like, let's do it." So I like applied, like went through the process, and then by like August, I got accepted, and I was moving out to New Haven, Connecticut.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Nice. And what are some differences between Grand Rapids and Connecticut?
Lots of differences.
Yeah.
The one that's really struck me is like the way universities interact with the city that they're in.
Mm.
Like the Yale New Haven dynamic is very different compared to like going to Hope, and the Hope Holland dynamic is like complete opposite.
Mm.
So just like seeing that has been a unique experience. But also, right, the other cool part, which I think it like Holland and like Grand Rapids doesn't tap into enough, is like New Haven's like, no, 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 like we're a small town, but like New York City is right there, and so is Boston.
Mm.
And like you want the small town feel and like just like have a backyard, but the big cities are right there, like that you can have that in New Haven. So that's been super fascinating to see that messaging happening and like that pitch. So like I think there's a lot of similarities just like in terms of like even like locations and like they're
Mm.
building trying to build ecosystems. Because New Haven's still really building up. It's like really
Mm.
going like Yale obviously helps
Yes.
because they're investing more and more into entrepreneurship and innovation, particularly with Yale Ventures and these new things. But it's like there is a lot of similarities in terms of how they do, but the difference is I think just like how the cities interact and also just like mindset. I think
Mm.
quite a bit. There's more of like a grittiness, I think, to New Haven, which I personally like coming from the east side of the state. West Michigan has some of that, but not as much as I think New Haven does.
Sure. Sure.
Yeah.
Awesome. And then when you got in the job, so what do you do now? Like what are some things you're working on?
Yeah, so now I'm 3 years in, which is crazy to say. So I've now been moved up into the director of student programming, and I oversee what we call our venture development programs. So essentially, it's anything that like help students build their own ventures.
Mm.
So it could be a nonprofit, for-profit, a hybrid model, whatever. It can be a small business. It could be this big startup idea.
Underwater drones.
It could be underwater drones. So it could be a little bit of everything. One of the things I really love about our center is it's super diverse and hits every single school at Yale. We're a completely independent center, and it's really like you just see every little bit of everything. And we get to see all the schools and like even like anywhere from like a freshman to a graduate PhD student. Like they all get to interact, which I feel like is so awesome.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
And what do those programs look like?
Yeah, so I lead our some of our flagship things, I would say. So like our summer fellowship program, it's a 10-week program. Which really cool. It's been like a full circle moment for me because I was like the intern in this program, like making sure the food arrived, and now I like oversee the whole thing.
Oh, that's awesome.
So it's been like a cool moment in that. But so that's our 10-week program, excuse me, for our most advanced teams essentially. So we give them a $15,000 check. We give them 10 weeks to work full time on their venture. It's 3 weeks in person, which is like a lot of workshops, mentorship. We do a overnight retreat. It's just a lot of different resources that come with that. They get to meet a lot of good people, and then 5 weeks remote, and they just like get time to work on stuff. And then the last 2 weeks, we do a huge NYU Yale pitch off, so we get to compete with them. This year's actually the 10th year of that, so it's like even predates what this city or this whole center is, how old it is. And so it's a really cool event that's like 300 plus people in the audience, and they get to just pitch and just also like we get to compete with NYU, which is kind of fun. We have a big trophy, which is cool.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
And what does the curriculum look like within that 10-week period?
Yeah, so every year looks a little bit different because like every cohort's a little bit different. I was even saying yesterday, like every cohort's got its own different personality. It's part of like I think the diversity of our center is like just everything's a little bit different every year, even though it's the same program.
Yes.
So it's this cohort's been like, hey, how do we do marketing? How do we do sales? So it's been a lot of like, okay, let's learn SEO. Let's learn how to do content marketing. Let's learn how to build community. What does product development even mean? What's a Gantt chart? What's all these different things? So like bringing in speakers that are experts in these fields. And so they've had 2 weeks of that. So they'll be a speaker in the morning, and then they would do office hours in the afternoon and have one-on-one time with that speaker. And then also have other mentorship opportunities with the Yale Network and things like that. So it's a lot of people, it's a lot of resources we're throwing at them, and it's definitely knowledge overload.
Yeah.
But that's on purpose. So, but the nice thing too is like we go from Memorial Day to Juneteenth, so they get a long weekend to start and a long weekend bookend it. So it's a nice way to they get some time to decompress too, even in those little moments.
And they go into this program, correct me if I'm wrong, with an idea already.
Yeah, a lot of them either they have traction in some format, and traction like from an R standpoint, it's a little bit different than I think when most people would consider that. So that even traction could be like, hey, we have a fully functioning prototype, or it's like really mocked up really nicely, and we have a plan for product development if it's more high tech or like a longer strategy, not the lean startup method necessarily.
Sure.
So and there's that, or they have revenue or like big time like users or anything like that. So that they're developed when they get to us for that program.
Cool. What are some startup ideas that you've seen go through? I'm just intrigued.
Yeah, so it's been all over the place, but a few that stand out. So one is called Atma Leather. They make leather out of banana peels and mango peels.
Oh my gosh,
so
that's cool.
Super cool. It's alternative leather. They built a full manufacturing plant over in India last summer. They just won a big pitch competition at Rice University, which is like a really big time pitch competition for students. They just keep winning money, which is super cool.
That's awesome.
But yeah, they made notebooks for us. It was like incredible what they've been able to do. The other one, which is currently in the program, that I think has been like really, they just finished this. This is why this is most recent. It's called Studio Heartbreak. So they are an animation studio, and these really cool animations that are incredible. And they just raised, I think, over $300,000 on Kickstarter. So it's just been like a really cool ride to see them, and also to like, it's like, the post Kickstarter me is like, oh, this is so cool to see.
Oh, that's awesome. So they're all over the map.
Yeah, every idea, like there's software ideas which are doing really well. There's like we have lots of arts because I mean that's what Yale is for. Like
Yes.
it's Yale, it's known for humanities, it's known for the arts. So it's a really cool ecosystem at Yale, which is like it's like really blossoming because we have like arts innovation, which I don't think people realize is such a big thing. It's a huge industry, and like I think Yale's really starting to really get into that.
Cool. Now I've seen a lot of video content come out from you, Matt.
Yeah.
So where is your heart and soul right now? Like what are you really trying to drive at? You're doing these programs and your heart's in that, but then what other areas as you're working with Yale really are you trying to drive towards?
Yeah, so one of the reasons I wanted to get to Yale is because one, I wanted to get to a bigger ecosystem, which it is.
Yes.
It's a little bit, it's different. It's not as big as I think I originally thought it was, but it's still bigger, which with connections in different places too. But it also gave me time to process a little bit more and also just like, what's this next thing?
Yeah.
And I knew I want to stay in this space. So I've been really thinking about like, how do I create a startup that's like helping to support startups, especially in like smaller ecosystems or ones that like, hey, we're just not supporting those, right?
Yeah.
So for a long time, like I started kind of the first year or two at Yale, like, okay, I'm like really interested in this like no code space. So how do you build tools without software background and like all those different things and building startups with that? So I thought I was like, I'll build like an incubator accelerator model where it's like based off of that. There's no code tools. Then about a year ago, from actually Tsai, around today, I went to this conference called the ConvertKit Craft and Commerce Conference. And essentially it's like a bunch of creators that like it's YouTubers, podcasters, like people doing communities and like at the really high level, at creator level. And I like had really good conversations with people and they're like, Matt, like, do you really want to work with people who don't know how to open a PDF? And I was like, no, I really don't. So that was like a shifting moment, but also realized like I loved the just having conversations with the ConvertKit team and just like seeing how they were built. I was like, this is so much different than like what I went through as a startup because they're a startup themselves, but they have no VC money. And I was like, that's super fascinating.
Yeah.
So like looked into them more, started looking around like, okay, what does it mean to be like a non-VC backed company and like what this all thinks? So they would pitch it as like, yeah, like we just pay our team like bonuses twice a year. And I'm like, that's incredible. So like there's all these different bonuses that came with that and like, hey, we can take a more long-term trajectory. We don't have to be in this like rat race of like constantly raising. Like it was just like, was a weird like cultural shift for me, like mind shift of like, ooh, like, yeah, this is really healthy. So what it kind of turned into over a couple of months is like, no, I want to help scalable non-VC backed startups. And I didn't know what that looked like. So it's been creating content. It's been creating a lot of YouTube videos the last year or so now. And just like, hey, I'm going to do some no code stuff. I'm going to talk about business basics and just like build YouTube while I'm trying to figure this out. Because again, I knew with Fathom, we didn't have a content engine.
Yes.
So I was like, I'm building this now.
Yes.
And like gonna invest in it. It's not gonna look pretty right now because I don't even know how to build videos. I don't even know how to edit, but we're gonna figure it out. And even lighting and all this, like I had no idea. So I was like, I'm gonna learn it and take this year of like, I'm not looking at analytics. I'm not doing any of that. I'm just gonna start building that part as I'm figuring out the rest. So that's been really cool to do that, and been building content for the last year. But then in the last 6 months, I've been building a free 5-week accelerator program for scalable non-VC backed startups. So it's a fully virtual program and it's fully free. There's no strings attached, and I've ran one cohort in the spring and now running second cohort right now, and it's just been like a really incredible experience.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
So is there a focus point of this 5-week? Like, what is the starting point and what is the ending point of the?
Yeah. So the hope is that like you come out of that 5 weeks like, hey, I have a foundation of what to build with,
Yeah.
right? Because like it's like everything that like I wish we would have gotten to Fathom.
Yeah.
Of, like there's like foundational content. Because even like Techstars, right? Like love Techstars, love the programs that we went through at Yale and like all these different things, but like some of the foundational stuff just didn't hit. It might have just been maybe they showed it and like we just didn't register that. Like definitely could have happened. So, but for week one is like take an experimental approach, not just like hey like this like I think lean startup is like this buzzword that everyone uses, but like hey let's like run things in experiments, which is very similar, but like let's like hey why is it this or that, like and things like that. Week two is like customer personas, like why is that super important, like how can you build experiments off that. Week three is sustainable traction, not just traction, because like it doesn't make sense to ever build a rocket ship normally unless you're doing some kind of Kickstarter campaign, but that's also really painful. And then four is like financial modeling, or what I call napkin numbers, like how do you understand how their metrics work. And then week five is like goals, habits, like setting like the long-term vision of stuff. And then that all builds on top of one another. So hopefully, right, you have a big vision, you understand your numbers a little bit more, and you understand how like, hey, I can build a business and here's how it could look in the future. So it might not hit at the right time, but hopefully you're like, hey, like, I have a really strong foundation. And like, even if things don't work out in the next 5-10 weeks, like it doesn't matter because I have a map to what I need to do to get forward, to move forward.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So how does someone find this 5-week accelerator program? And then how do we find your content?
Yeah, so it is at starstation.co. If you can go there, that's the website. You can also just find my personal website at Matthew Gira, GIRA.com. Everything for me is there. So content, and then YouTube. If you search in YouTube, it's Matthew Gira. I'll pop right up. And also I'm really posting on LinkedIn as well. So feel free to follow or connect on there too.
Nice. Awesome. Anything else you'd want to say that we didn't talk about?
No, thanks for having me. This has been a really cool experience. The studio is amazing. And no, I really appreciate you taking the time.
Awesome. Well, thanks for coming on, man. It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, same.